All right, good evening, everybody. We're so glad that you're here. You are welcome to continue eating. I don't want to infringe on your dinner time, but we do have Michelle Allen with us. She's one of Bridge Life's board members and is also the expansion coordinator for Isaiah 117 House. And so she's going to share a little bit with you about Isaiah 117. So just continue to eat, enjoy yourself. Feel free to get up and get more food. And then as soon as she's done, you'll have a few more minutes just to sit and visit before we get into our presentation.
Thanks, Judy. Good evening. So a little bit about Isaiah 117 House. Just out of curiosity, has anybody heard of it? One? Oh, look at it! I'm so excited. Isaiah 117 House. So Isaiah 117, let's talk about the verse first. So do good, seek justice, take care of the widow, and take care of the orphan. And so Isaiah 117 was founded in Tennessee from a mama who was introduced to the foster care system and could not believe that on the day of removal that kiddos were brought to this office that had government-issued furniture and would sleep on the floor and really just have to sit in a cubicle maybe with a caseworker. In some of our counties, they ride around in the patrol car because they're removed by the sheriff's office. And so her heart was burdened for years before she said, okay, God, I'm going to listen. And really the dream is what if. So Isaiah 117 House has a mission that's threefold. One is to reduce the trauma for children, well, as much as you can, because you're never going to take that away, right? But reduce the trauma for kiddos on removal day, to lighten the load for the caseworkers, and then also ease the transition for foster parents. So that's the threefold goal for Isaiah 117 House. And really what we're looking to do is build a house in Manatee, Sarasota County that the children would go to on day of removal. They would be greeted by trauma-trained volunteers, and their sole responsibility is just to love on those kiddos while the caseworker is there trying to find placement. And so they are given new clothes, they get a bath, they can play outside, they can come in and do their homework, they can have a meal of their choice, whether that's Chick-fil-A, or we just had a teen a couple weeks ago. He was pretty cute. The volunteer asked him what he wanted for dinner, and he said he wanted to cook it. And so he proceeded to cook asparagus, which is what he wanted. I couldn't believe that because I'm not an asparagus lover. So he cooked the whole meal, and it was really fun because the volunteers ate, and so did the caseworker, sat down and ate with them. And he was so proud of himself to be able to cook his own meal with very little help from the volunteers, and then able to have a shower with his own toiletries, clothes that he could change into afterwards, pajamas for them to spend the night. And the beautiful thing about that is each child is given new sets of clothes for a week in a backpack. And so it's clothes specific to their size. So a lot of them haven't had a brand new pair of shoes. And sometimes they'll say, I want those red Nikes. And then a volunteer will go out and find those red Nikes in their size and bring them to them before they leave the house. And so they are just given so much love and attention. Meanwhile, the caseworker comes in, has an office. They're able to have eyes on the kiddo at all times, because that is our law, and be able to do their job while the children are being fed, bathed, toiletry. In their office, they're having to do all that, right? So now they have a place to go that eases their burden. And then also when you're looking at all the foster families that will take those kiddos in, once they say the hard yes, then they come and they're told, don't go by Walmart and come and get all the things you need for this newborn. Do you need a car seat? Do you need diapers and wipes? Do you need a twin bed? What is it that you need? And we have that for you at the house. And so just come straight here. And so the kiddos will leave with new clothes, a bag for a week, and then they will also be able to help the foster families meet those needs too as well, those immediate needs that you have. And there's freezer meals, so you can go home with a meal. And so what we're looking for is we want to bring that to our community. That is a gap, as I'm sure I'm talking to the subject matter experts here. That is a gap in our community. And so what we're looking to do is build a house or refurbish a house that's already existing. And so we're in the awareness phase. And what that means is we had our kickoff January 23rd. And for about 6 months, we're just going to raise awareness. There's so many people that I have talked to just in almost 2 months that have no idea what removal day even is. They don't even know that term. And so really that's what we try to do in the next 6 months is raise awareness about removal day, about lessening the trauma for our kiddos as they experience that, helping the foster families and the caseworkers and lightening the load of the caseworker, because they're doing the job, the government's doing the job that the church is supposed to do. That's our job. We're told that, right, in Isaiah 1:17. And so really it's all about us doing the things that we were called to do, which we will do better because we have the time. We're not trying to find placement for them. We're just loving on them. And so that's what we're trying to do is eventually in September, we'll start a fundraiser and start raising funds. Although tomorrow, if somebody said, I have land for you and I'm going to give it to you, I'm taking it. And so, but in the meantime, what I'm asking of y'all is how can you help? Oh, well, you can. So a couple things that you can do is I would love to speak to any groups that you are participating in or you know somebody is, whether that's a church group, whether that's Kiwanis or any kind of men's, women's groups. I would love for you to invite me to come speak to them to share what Isaiah 1:17 is all about. And then also, if you're interested in volunteering or you know somebody that would love to, we have our expansion meetings on the first Monday of every month at Grace Community Church, and it's from 6 to 7, 1 hour. I'm a really good timekeeper, so I keep to the 1 hour. And there we split into groups to really just work on whether it's speaking engagements, lemonade stands. We have lemonade stands for the kiddos to help the kiddos, and it's a real fun time, believe it or not. It does raise a lot of awareness, but also money, which I'm like, lemonade stands, that's kind of odd. But it really works, and it has. There are 21 open homes across the country right now, and we're looking at about 54 in total that are kind of along the way. For Florida, there are 4, none are open. One in Jacksonville is getting ready to close on their property in a couple weeks. One right next to Jacksonville just broke ground. And then Hillsborough County is at the same place we are. We had our kickoff a day apart. And so right now there are no homes in Florida, but we're hoping soon in the next year there will be 4, and then we hope it continues to take off because this gap is everywhere, right? I mean, there's so many people that have no idea about removal day and the trauma that places on our kiddos forever. So I'm going to go around to each of your tables, and if you want to sign up, we'll put you on our newsletter so that you can get more information. I'm also going to ask you if you attend a church, if you would let me know which church, because we are having a pastor's luncheon right here on the 30th at Sarasota Baptist in Sarasota on the 29th, and we would love for you to hand deliver an invitation to your pastor to have your pastor come and attend that breakfast to learn about Isaiah 1:17. And then our hope is from that, I'll be invited to be able to speak at those churches and really just share the message and spread the message throughout Sarasota and Manatee County. Okay? Any questions? All righty. Oh, yes. Great question. So she's asking, are all the kids that are removed going to go to this house? So right now, so just so y'all know, DCF and the Safe Children Coalition are 150% on board. They're really excited and wish the house was already open. And it just depends, right? So have they already located a family to take, a grandma or something? Then obviously probably not. For the most part, yes. And it depends also on how crowded the house is, because there are certain rules. You know, we're not putting a bunch of teen boys with a bunch of teen girls and those kind of things. So there are strict, some guidelines for the houses. So every situation is different and unique. But I have to tell you, I have an app on my phone, and so the program coordinators, which are the ones who kind of run the houses, they're always texting like, oh, we're getting this, it's whoever they're getting, and it's constant. They're coming in 24/7, and it's amazing. The turnover in just one house in one day is amazing to me. It's like, oh, we had, this sweet 3-sibling group for 3 hours. Now we have 2, and then we have somebody from juvenile detention. That's a one-on-one. We don't let anybody else in the house at that time. So, it just really varies. Yes, very much situational. No, that's great. Okay, so that's a great question too. She's asking, does somebody live in the home? And no. So the program coordinator runs the home. We have a list of about 40 trauma-trained volunteers. They all sign up in advance. So it just depends on what time it is. They're on call. They'll be called in if the house isn't open, or they'll just come at their designated time if the house is open. Yep. Yeah. And it's great because there's a boys' room, there's a girls' room. It's really fantastic. The secretary of Department of Children and Families is on board. The assistant secretary came and spoke at our kickoff. So it's really neat to see the agencies working with the churches and getting this done, and the right thing for our kiddos, right? That's what's most important, is prioritizing the care of the kiddos on a very traumatic day. Yeah. That's a great question. The homes are usually about 2,500 to 2,800 square feet on about a half acre. They all have a fenced-in playground in the back. If it's built, they're all built the same. So they have the third bedroom, if you will, is really the caseworker's office with surrounding windows. There are monitors in their office too, so they can see everywhere. Obviously, the cameras are not in the bathroom or the bedrooms, but they're everywhere else. And so they can have eyes on the child all the time. But there's also an entire space of storage, because we have tons of all those things that I just told you about. We try to keep sizes for all kiddos and all size ranges, and then also car seats and all the other things that we need. So there's a lot of storage capacity as well. Yeah. It's great, isn't it? I mean, it's just fantastic. I can't wait. I would love if somebody tomorrow said, hey, here's land, or here's a house, and would just be such a blessing. But that's okay. We'll continue to raise awareness, because that's so important too, right? There's so many people, and it's amazing to me, just don't have any idea, no idea how that all works. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, enjoy your food, and I'll be around to your tables. Thanks so much.
Another day to tell of all your kindness. When I think of your goodness, oh, I sing for joy and I speak the name. Thank you, Jesus. In the evening when the night is falling, when trouble's rising, I can't hear you calling. I don't have to worry, I won't be afraid. I speak the name. Here's what I'm gonna do. I give you all the glory. I give you all the praise. That's the name. Yeah. Speak the name that has power. Speak the name above all other. Who is Shout if you wanna give him thanks. Surely the Lord is in this place. Every blood-bought saint, come and praise his name. Surely the Lord is in this place. Shout if you wanna give him thanks. Surely the Lord is in this place. Every blood-bought saint, come and praise his name. Surely the Lord is in this place. Shout if you wanna give him thanks. Surely the Lord is in this place. Every blood-bought saint, come and praise his name. Come and praise his name. Let our praise be loud. It's here in your house. Let your praise be loud. It's here in your house. Let your joy break out. As our voices fill the room, do what only you can do. Here in your house, we're gonna worship you. We're gonna worship you. I remember those melodies, the words we sang when I first believed. Songs of redemption, stories of hope, heaven awakened.
Okay, I always hate to interrupt you guys because I know you love visiting with each other, and we love that about tonight too. Just a couple of housekeeping things, and then I'm going to introduce our speakers for tonight. Get up. I mean, we want to be super informal, so if you need to stretch your legs or use the restroom or go get more food, please feel free to do that. I know our presenters tonight also want to keep it pretty conversational, and so I'm preparing you now. I know we tend to be a little bit of a quieter group, but if you've got questions or you want to chime in, there's going to be opportunities for that for you to be able to share. I did want to let you know the gathering next month, we normally meet on the second Monday, and next month we've got a speaker who's actually flying in from out of town, and so it's on April 3rd. It's the first Monday. So just as I know some of you guys are kind of looking for the registration to go live and wanted to point that out to you, we'll be here again, but it'll be April 3rd instead of the 10th, so just make sure you pay attention to that date change. We're really excited to have Jana Hunsley from Project 1025 that's going to join us for the gathering next month. Jana was a teenager when her parents had several international adoptions that happened at different times, and she's a TBRI practitioner now, and has done a ton of work on adoption's impact on the entire family. She was a sibling in a family, and she said a lot of people would ask how the adopted child was adjusting or how her parents were doing. And she said nobody ever asked how she was doing. And so she really brings that sibling perspective, which I think is so super valuable. I know for our family, it's really changed the way that we've parented and approached some of our kids who were in the home before our adoption. It's been really positive for us. So Jana is going to be our speaker next month. She is also helping us put on our first family camp, which is going to be on April 1st. If that's ever something that you're interested in, that's something that we're kind of dipping our toe in the water to see what that looks like. And we do have a couple of openings left. And so if you're an adoptive family and that's something that you're interested in learning more about, I'd like to talk to you about that at the end of the night, or you can email me as well. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. So Family Initiative is here tonight, and they're going to do our training for us. And so I'm going to have you guys go ahead and come up and hand over the microphone to you, and we'll just hop kind of right into it. So thanks so much for being here with us tonight. We will ask that you use the mic. So awesome. Thanks.
This will work out good, Miss Ange. The one microphone? Walking into babies, that's not good. Hey, so good evening. My name is David Brown, co-founder of Family Initiative.
I'm Anjali Vandry, the other co-founder of Family Initiative.
So we are super excited to be here tonight. It's great to see everybody. I know we're looking forward to talking about some of the stuff that we do in relationship to supporting kids and families, right, and behaviors. Miss Ange? My favorite. Your favorite, yep. So real quick, before we get started, can we just we're trying to get an idea, like the audience of the folks in the room. So I don't know, like anybody here foster families? There you go, Miss Ange. Adoptive families, probably the same. Yeah, there you go, right? So anybody that's not in either one of those categories is in the room? Boom. I love your shirt.
I know, I was waiting to see how.
Today's legal tampering day. So I'm like all over, who are they going to sign? No, and by the way, nobody is the answer. That's what the answer is to that. So real quick, Ange, we should talk about the org, right? So Family Initiative is an impact organization. We are based in Cape Coral, Florida. It's sort of Ange and I spend most of our time, right, Ange? And so where do we begin with this, right? So many years ago, I used to work for a community-based care lead agency in Southwest Florida. I was on the management team there, working in out-of-home care. And so I was lucky enough, the good Lord put this lady in the hallway that I worked in. And for whatever reason, in the course of my work, it was odd. We moved office space a bunch of times, probably like 3 different occasions, right? In like 4 years, we moved office space, right? And for some reason, every time me and my team moved office space, Anjali moved with us. Even though she worked for like a totally different organization, it just so happened she was always in sort of like proximity of our office space, right? And so it was one of those things where I think we got to become really good friends and watch child welfare sort of play out, right, over a lot of years. And had a lot of like tough conversations about what we saw. We laughed a lot because there was some lot of funny moments too. And I think just kind of watching things happen and not happen, I think really served for us to be sort of a catalyst of trying to start our own nonprofit organization to create something that we thought was the way that families should be engaged. And we started that 8 years ago, which is crazy, right? Plus I'm getting old is what I was thinking to myself when I say 8 years, right? Didn't feel like that long ago. And so it's been one of these things where I feel like this adventure, right, of like trying to figure out every day, trying to work through to determine what is the best thing for kids, right? What can we do? And I know I'm a social worker. Anjali's
Okay, I'll drop it. It's a problem. I'm so terrified I'm going to drop the mic tonight. That sounds funnier than I meant it to be, not like that. So I'm also a social worker. I'm also a board-certified behavior analyst.
And so I think for us is, we're perpetually like on the hunt, right? Trying to figure out, what's out there. And, you go to school and you get trained in so many different, standing, existing modalities. And there's lots of agencies in any town. And, they use cognitive behavioral therapy or, whatever. It's like sort of the classical stuff, right, that folks use. And you just sort of watch families struggle, right? Like no matter where we are, just it's hard to watch. And so I was really lucky. I was doing some consulting work in Texas, right, probably like 8 years ago. And I happened to be in Fort Worth, Texas, working. They had a new privatized system in Texas. And so they brought a couple of us over to Texas to help them build that system, basically, to launch it in Texas the way it exists today in Florida. And I happened to be there with like 2 other ladies who were from Texas Christian University. And they knew all about trust-based relational intervention. And they're like, yeah, this lady Karen, like she's down the street, we work with her, she consults, like, it was really, looking back at it, how lucky I was to be in that space in that moment, in that time, right, to just be there. And I remember I flew back, right, Ange, from Texas, and God bless Anjali, so when I get on the plane, you're like radio silence, right, while you're in the air. And the minute the plane landed, like I must have written 20 paragraphs while we were in the air because I couldn't do anything else but sit in the plane and think, and just blasted her with like a bunch of emails, right, about trust-based relational intervention and how, like, to me, it was the thing that we had always talked about, right? Like, all the work we did and all the families we came across, it's the first time I'd ever heard anybody say anything out loud to me that really made sense about what kids need and how we can support families. And the only other thing, and I think Angela do a great job talking about behaviors with all of you, but I think the really profound part that I would say to anybody and everywhere we go is I think it's really powerful to me, the shift in my head. And it's funny, we actually were talking to a COO of one of the CBCs just the other day, right? About it not being the responsibility of children to get better. Right? It's like everything feels to me like the onus is put on children. And I was thinking to myself, it's like, I'm the professional. Like, I'm the grown-up. Right? Like, I'm the responsible person, right? And I guess in an essence, the way Karen Purvis talked about that to me struck me so profoundly that it was just like the fact that so often as a system we put the onus on kids. And it's like they're looking to us to show them the way. And so often I see from, what I saw for a lot of years was people putting the responsibility back on kids to be better. So it's cool to finally have a model that I think to begin to think about myself. Like, not just about them, but about me. How do I be better for them? So I think it's cool in that context to think about that and then think about behaviors, right? And how kids express. I would say to our staff, this is just these kids sharing their trauma with us. This is how they share their trauma, is by what they're doing, right? And then, so what do we do as the grown-ups and responsible people to see the need and meet the need, right? And the best person I've ever met in my life to do that is this lady right here. She's just phenomenal, and I don't know, so you talk about behavior, because you're...
Thank you. I gotta say, I'm super fortunate to be able to work with Dave every day. I think we have very robust conversations about how to best meet the needs of kids, and I appreciate having someone who thinks so critically about it and continues to. A decade later, we are constantly trying to find the best way we can to help support families across the state. And I think, for us to be able to be here tonight and share with you guys and talk with you guys, I mean, we want to hear from you too, about what are the things that you're dealing with, what do you find that is helpful, kind of talk through it. And that's why instead of doing a PowerPoint and standing up here, we'd rather have a conversation and a dialogue with you guys. So, I know, we would keep you here all night, frankly, because this is one of our favorite. I know, I'm trying to get to it at some point here. So I guess the first thing I'll say is anyone here familiar with TBRI? Okay, so we got a good mix. Okay, awesome, that's fantastic. Has anyone been through the training? Yes, okay, so a couple of folks. Awesome, excellent, cool. So we'll try not to call on you guys too much, but we certainly will call on you some. And I know you guys are here tonight, and we were here to talk about behaviors. One of the things that I love that we get to do every day is really, and this is one of the reasons we love TBRI so much, is because it really takes the best of what is known today and puts it together in a way that is understandable and really meets the needs of our kids, but also addresses as a caregiver and as an adult our role, like you were saying, Dave, right? Like, what is our role and what do we do to meet the needs of our kids? So I'll be totally candid. When I got that 20-paragraph email or emails from Dave, he got back and I was like, oh, I don't know about this. I will say I was a behavior analyst through and through. I was like, I don't see how this is gonna work. I don't think we can do this. I don't get it. Like, nope, I don't like it, right? And after, I feel like hours, we sat for hours and hours and talked about it. Finally, I was like, that kind of makes sense, right? And I think since that day forward, we have fully embraced TBRI and have integrated across the board with our organization, with all the families we work with all the kids we work with our staff. And it's been pretty transformational, I think, in the lives of so many of the families that we work with, and so many of us, I think. So We'll talk about it all night. I'll move on from that. So behaviors. Let's talk about behaviors. I'll get to it at some point. So are behaviors an issue in your home? Yes. Yes? All right. What are some of the things you all struggle with? I don't know how to do this with one microphone.
I was gonna say behaviors are a problem.
Oh, okay.
I was joining.
What are some of the behaviors? I see they're all ranges of kids here, from littles all the way. Yes.
And for our virtual audience, just whatever they shout out, if you would say it again into the microphone.
Got it. Thank you. All right. So I guess shout out, what are some of the behaviors that you deal with?
Inability to self-regulate.
Inability to self-regulate. I like it. We're going straight into TBR. I love it. Other things that we struggle with at home.
Lying.
Lying. Good one. Very good one. I heard something.
Shutting down.
Shutting down. Okay.
Aggression.
Aggression. All right. Physical, like hitting, kicking. What is that?
Yeah, like not stuff you call cops for, but
Right.
literally just kicking and hitting or, going behind someone's back and pinching them really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Mom's not looking.
Got you. All right. So hitting, kicking, you said pinching, going behind your back and pinching. That hurts too, that spot. And they know where to find it
Oh,
too.
no, I didn't mean that. I mean just like a kid who's gonna be sneaky to like,
Come up behind you.
or come up behind another kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
Got it. Okay.
that kind of stuff.
Got it. That is definitely a common thing. What else? How about two more? Go ahead.
Our daughter is 9. We've had her for 8 years. We adopted her when she was 1.
I'm going to bring the microphone closer.
We've really noticed sassy, disrespectful attitude, mainly towards me more than my husband. And I don't know if it's an attachment issue, an adoption issue, a parenting issue. I'm at the point where I'm like, we need family counseling. She's already in counseling, so Mama needs some help.
Excellent. Good, great example. How about one more? Because I said two.
Property destruction.
Property, lady in the back, property destruction. Thank you. All right. So what I want to do first is kind of talk about behavior from behavior analysis sort of way to help understand it. Because for us, I think this helps frame the context and kind of talk through it. And Leanne is here, who is our site lead here in Sarasota, our statewide child welfare director. So some of you might have gone through the training with her, and she's kind of talked about this too. We got our team of folks across Sarasota, Manatee County, who might have come into the home and worked with you guys. And really what we want to do when we're working in the home is, when we're talking about some of those behaviors, get on the same page about what we're talking about. So I think one of the challenges we see, I didn't ask you about the behaviors you see, sorry, did you want to?
Oh, me? So how about rolling eyes, slamming doors, like stomping? Like typically it's like a loud noise, stomp, march down the hallway, slam a door. That's like a couple times a night that happens in my house.
Sound familiar? That's what I like it. Good. So we're all seeing similar behaviors, it sounds like. And it's funny because I think those behaviors start little and they go on for a very long time. So, and part of that's why understanding what we're talking about is so important. So when we are in homes and we're having conversations like this, part of what we want to do is make sure we're on the same page about what we're talking about. So one of the things when we're talking behaviors, we talk about making sure that they're observable behaviors. So we can say sassy, but sassy to me might be different than what sassy is to you. You guys are on the same page about what that means. Maybe you call it disrespect or I don't know what else folks call it. And you use that word too. But I think understanding what we're talking about. So if you have a child who at school is getting into trouble, making sure that you and that teacher are on the same page about what we're talking about. Because disrespect is a big one. What's another big one we get? I'm stuck with disrespect in my head. Non-compliance, right? Defiance. Defiance is another really good one. But what that looks like can vary. It can vary between you and other adults in your home. It can vary between what's happening at school and at home. It can vary from when they're here versus when they get home. So we really got to make sure we're speaking about the same thing. If we want to address it and change it, we got to make sure we are on the same page about it. Because if I react one way and you react another way, and I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't realize we were talking about that because I let it slide and you wanted a consequence for it. Ugh. Now we're not on the same page because I didn't even realize that's what we were talking about. And as we will not get to tonight, but I would love to if we could have 20 hours, we'd get to what our triggers are, and that triggers are different for each of us, right? So even in your own household, between you and your spouse, between you and your sister, between your parents, like triggers are different for everybody. So it's important to understand and know what those are. You want to add something, actually?
All I was going to say about this, I think it's interesting because it makes me laugh because I just feel like, you know, when something's your own experience and then you go in another house and it's like the exact same thing, you talk to people. So obviously we go in home and work with foster families and we have this conversation, right, about this. And mom and dad will be like, disrespect is the issue, right? So we'll unpack with each of them, like, so what does that mean to you? And it's always hilarious to me because like dad will like rattle off a list of things that are completely different than the list of things that mom will rattle off. Although to both of them it falls under the umbrella of disrespect, right? And so it's always fascinating to me, like when you just observe and when we're there enough, they kind of forget you're there, sort of. And it's amazing to watch, like how the child will do something, trigger mom, because the kids figure out real quick, this is her list. And they'll work that list and get mom, right? But there'll be moments then somehow that mom, in certain days and certain moments, where like they're connected to mom. Like there's just, you know, you have like a good couple hours and then all of a sudden you watch them and it's like, then they go down the list of dad. And it's really always ironic to me because the parents feel aligned, that they agree that it's disrespect, but when you unpack the disrespect, it's like two totally different sets of behaviors. And so it's really hard because we are not unified, because what I see a lot is mom's sort of like, honey, you need to lighten up. You know, when he's getting triggered by what's going on, and then vice versa. Like the child will then get her and be like, really? Like that's such a big deal. So it's funny to watch that dynamic play out of, it's actually not the same set of things. Although they think they are in agreement that they are struggling with disrespect, it's two totally different laundry lists of things that they agree fall under the umbrella of disrespect. So it's interesting to watch first to try to get everybody on the same page. Like you guys are actually on two different lists. Like these are really different sets of behaviors. Although you think you're in agreement, you're not really.
100%. I love it. Thank you. That is true. Yeah, and it's always an awkward conversation. Yes, ma'am.
So when you talk about triggers, are you talking about the parents' triggers?
Oh, yeah.
Not
Yep.
the kids'
Yeah, we'll talk about the kids' triggers, but absolutely the parent triggers. So what gets you kind of to flip your lid, and we'll make sure we get to that point too, because that's when we talk about, I know one of the things we wanted to talk about is the difference between tantrums and meltdowns, and we can definitely talk about that. But absolutely, because if what you're seeing and what the other person in your home is seeing, you think they're the same thing, like Dave said, that umbrella term, we'll go with disrespect, because that's a super common one, regardless of the age of the kids. I mean, maybe not the teeny tinies like that, but still, as soon as they can move and make noise, I think it starts, right, with some of that. If you think you're talking about the same thing, and we're on the same page, and we have a plan for it, and then all of a sudden, you're not, and you see the other person ignoring that or handling it a different way, that in itself will create you to get a little bit dysregulated and get upset because you thought you had a plan. So it is hard, and I think it's much more common than we are aware of. I know the conversations it is every single family we go into, when we're sitting in meetings with the school or daycare and the families, even within the school itself, I think for them to be on the same page and have that conversation. So we'd encourage you, talk to each other, talk to who's involved in your child's life, and this helps for those of you who have to talk with your case managers or guardians when they're asking some of those things. It also gives you a clear way to communicate with them about the seriousness of the behavior and what kind of support might be best fit to come into your home to help you, or for your child to get. So I think understanding, making sure it is something that you can all agree on. And what we want, again, is something that is observable. So anyone in here can walk and be like, I know exactly what they're talking about. When you say sassy, you mean eye rolling, stomping off, slamming doors. Everyone in this room knows it when they see it, right? Where sassy could be playfully sassy or it could be disrespectful sassy, which are all umbrella terms. So really think about, is this an umbrella term or am I talking about specific observable things? Typically, we also want them to be measurable, right? That's a good way to know it's observable. Can I see how long it's happening? Can I see how loud it is? Can I count how many times it's happening? That is one, if we're doing that, then we know we're counting it, right? We are on the same page with that. And that's how we know if it's changing or not, because sometimes it doesn't feel like it, right? It doesn't feel like it, but if you're like, all right, well, today it was only 21 times instead of 24 times, doesn't feel that way when you're talking about tantrums, which you would define. But if you're measuring it, you're like, all right, we're making some progress here. We're getting somewhere with that. So I would encourage you. I mean, we do that. We're like, all right, write your list. I'm going to write my list, and then let's look at it. And it's very eye-opening, I think, to be like, oh, that's what bothers you. Good to know. But then you can come up with a plan. If we're working with a child, and we know there's something that bothers Dave, but it doesn't bother me, when that happens, I can jump in and address it because I know it's not going to trigger me or get me dysregulated or upset me. And same for Dave. There are certain things that it won't bother him at all, but to me, I'm like, whoop, can't deal with this right now. So it's easy for him to go in and manage it and get it back to a calm state where we can all kind of move forward from it. So I think that's one of the biggest things when we're talking about behaviors is getting on the same page about that. Does that make sense? Questions about any of that?
So you just said,
Hey, you're getting good at this. I like it.
so you just said that you want to be on the same page. That's pretty common. And that possibly the person who is not have that as a trigger could be the one to address the issue. But if they're not triggered, a lot of times what happens, I know my house, is that the one who doesn't get triggered just blows it off. And then so you don't feel like it gets addressed. And then so then your blood pressure is going up because you're triggered by by not being dealt with. And vice versa.
Absolutely.
On both ways.
Yeah. And I think, so this is where there's got to be a plan, but to have a plan, we need to know what we're even talking about to start with. So we're only at step one of the plan, right? So making sure we know what we're even talking about, because we got to know that. Yes?
I was just going to say, sometimes you don't know something's going to trigger you until it happens, and then it's suddenly like you see red, and you're like,
Yeah. But I think a lot of this, and we'll talk about, is having those conversations, right? Intentional conversations about what's going on. Then afterwards being like, all right, well, that didn't go well. What happened here? And let's think about and talk about it. And that's where there are folks that can come in and support you and work with you and help you with those conversations. So once we do know I gotta get to this. All right, so now we know what behaviors we're talking about. So let's say we're talking about disrespect. Dave gave a wonderful example of what that is and what it looks like in your home, right? So everyone here agreed and knew what that was. So that we're gonna talk about disrespect. From a behavioral standpoint, Dave said this earlier, our kids are engaging in behaviors to meet a need, right? The reason they do that is because it serves a purpose. This is not just children. This is for all of us. We do things because they work. If it didn't work, we probably wouldn't keep doing them. We don't keep doing them. So we really have to figure out what is the need behind that behavior. For a lot of our kids, this is the best way they can communicate that need. This is what has worked for them. From a behavioral standpoint, again, I'm going to preface everything with that because that is a caveat when we're talking about this. What we look at is the reasons those behaviors are happening typically fall into like any of the behaviors you think about, and we can talk about how we integrate the TBRI part of this into the meeting the need, is we're looking at it from 4 main areas when behaviors happen. Now, before I say this, they're not mutually exclusive. So they can happen for multiple reasons, but for clarity, we'll talk about it as 4 separate categories. So one is attention. Everyone talks about attention-seeking behaviors, right? So these are your class clown sorts of kids who like to make, when you have multiple kids in the home, there's one who likes to be the prankster or the jokester or kind of sneak up behind you, like those kids. Sometimes it can be things like making noises. It can be every time you pick up the phone and your kids want your attention, that's attention-seeking behavior, right? They're fine, but the phone rings and you're on it. They're like, Mom, and you're like, I've been here for 6 hours with no conversation. All of a sudden, as soon as something happens, right? All of a sudden, or when you're paying too much attention to another child, Those are the kinds, and these can be, any of the behaviors can fall into that category. So your job is to figure out what is the reason. So what is the why behind this when we're talking about those behavioral things. So attention's one of them. And again, you'll see that when you are not attending to them, when you're distracted doing something else, when they're bored sometimes, right? When they like that. And those are your kids who typically respond really well to verbal praise. They thrive off of that when you give that to them. So behavior is happening for attention. Anything you want to add about that?
The only thing I was going to say too is attention can also be negative, right? So they don't have to be positive in that regard. Of like they can be getting in trouble and things happening to them because then they get time with you, right? It's like if I go to the principal's office, they're going to call you, right? And then it's about me, right? So I think sometimes the way we think about attention sometimes it makes perfect sense with the kids that we work with every day about how they try to set the situation up, right?
Absolutely, and I think we talk a lot about our kids who the only way they had learned to get their parents' attention was through acting up. So when a child is playing nicely or quiet or occupied, we're not as likely to go over and intervene, and because we're busy. We got a lot going on all day, every day, so it's harder to go over there and be like, I'm gonna sit and, I don't know, cuddle with them and praise them and all that. But as soon as they do something, we're on it, right? We're like, hey, quit throwing toys at each other, whatever it is, right? But like Dave was saying, even that verbal reprimand, even though it's not positive attention, I don't know why I'm air quotes, because it is not positive attention, it's still attention. And our kids are quick, they learn very quickly, I can act out and get that attention. Just like you were saying, unfortunately for a lot of our kids at school too, when they do act out and get sent to the principal's office, there's a lot of adults there who are like, oh, what happened? Even all of that is, we used to have a kid who was like, well, I love going there. I get to sit with the grown-ups and they give me candy. I was like, well, there you go. That's what, right? So they're very quick on understanding that. So I think the attention can look different. So pay attention to that. So attention is the first one. The second one that our kids act out sometimes, one of the reasons they engage in some of the behaviors, is to get out of doing things or to delay the time to do things. I think our favorite example of this is bedtime. When it's bedtime, you hear,
I mean, I don't know about everybody else in the room, but I think that has been the struggle of our lifetime with both of my kids is bedtime. Getting them to smoothly transition from Bluey to going to brush their teeth and go potty and put their PJs on, right? Like that is like the hardest transition in the world of like how to segue them out of, whatever, Spidey and Friends, whatever's on Disney Junior tonight.
It's always something, right? I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I don't know, what else?
They come out like 7 other times.
7 other times, right? There's something, and you don't, yeah.
Which I think a kid is brilliant, because my wife has a thing about they've got to eat enough food. Like their belly's full. And my daughter's so savage, she'll come on, she'll be like, but I'm just still really hungry. And you can see my wife's like, oh, I gotta make her. I'm like, this kid is so smart. She knows exactly like what to say to get her to stay out there. And I look at my wife and it makes me laugh because she's just so slick.
Can I tell a funny story about your daughter? Because I think this is so cute. She'd be mortified if she knew we were telling stories about her, because now she's too old for that, right? But when she was little, she'd do that and she'd ask for an apple. And she'd take like these teeny tiny bites with her loose teeth, and it would take like 2 hours, like, right? She knew, but that is avoiding. It's delaying the time until we gotta go to bed, take a bath, do homework, whatever it might be. So those excuses that come up and again, as a parent, you want to make sure you're meeting the needs of your kids. But I think also balancing that when we're looking at that, be like, is this an unmet need? Or is this willful disobedience? And even though it's not willful in that moment, it's still, and this is a TBRI thing we'll talk about, but really looking at what's the reason here. So school is another good example. If I'm in the front office, I'm not doing my work in the classroom. I don't have to do the math assignment or write my paragraph or whatever it is. That might be too hard for me, but instead of me saying, I don't know how to do this, I can throw my chair and then I get sent to the front office, where I get people talking to me, giving me candy, and I'm not doing work now. So I think thinking about that, about what is it to avoid, and sometimes it's just to take a lot longer, because in this back and forth and eating an apple, now I'm not going to bed for another hour because I'm hanging out out here and eating. So I think thinking about those reasons too, what that looks like. And this can be tricky because again, we don't want our kids to go to bed hungry or scared or have to go to the bathroom or whatever it might be. So I think part of this is, we'll talk about it in a second after I finish going through this. So second one, so first one's attention, second one is to avoid or to delay the time that we're doing something to get out of it. The third one is to gain access to something. So they want something. So this is typically seen with siblings, but it can be, I want the toy you have, right? I want that.
I want the iPad.
I want the iPad, yeah. iPads, phones, electronics are a big thing, I think, for all our kids. But they want to gain access to that. And if I shove you off the couch, now I have the iPad. That worked for me, right? So these are the things. So, and again, this can look very different depending on the age of your child and what the item is, but to gain access to something that they want. So that's the third one. Anything you want to add about that one? The last one that we deal with, and we can, I'm going to keep saying we'll talk more about this, but we will. The last reason we talk about from, again, a behavioral standpoint is because it meets a need, an internal need. And typically we see these like the sensory seeking behaviors. So some of our kids who like, trying to think, some of our kids, so I worked with a young man once who used to run into people a lot, and they said he was being aggressive because he was a big kid and he would go in and he'd like shove against you. So that was aggressive behavior. But what we found out, it was he needed that proprioceptive input. So it was a sensory seeking behavior, but they labeled it as aggressive. So really looking at each of those behaviors, and they're different behaviors. I mean, we've had kids who pull hair, they pull their own hair, they like the feeling of it. They're kids who do lots of different things. Some of the self-injury that we see sometimes is actually stimulatory behavior is what helps calm and regulate. So thinking about our kids and knowing that some of those behaviors that we see that are sensory are self-soothing, and that's why our kids engage in them, because they do help them gain regulation. So those four are the main reasons when we're looking at behaviors, again, from a behavioral standpoint, why are these behaviors occurring? The attention, to get out of doing something or delay time, to gain access to something, and to meet a need, sensory, internal kind of way. And I think once we understand those, this is your job, essentially, is to look at those behaviors and be like, all right, let me figure out what's going on here. And that can change. So it might be, what would you say, disrespect we were talking about? That might happen for one reason with you, but another reason for me. With you, it might be like, I don't want to be around mom. Whatever, you were saying it's targeted mostly to you, like, for whatever reason, I don't want to be around you, I'm going to avoid, right? I don't want to be a part of it. But it might happen with someone else because they want someone to come over and talk to them and be like, tell me what's wrong, don't talk like that, whatever it might be, right? It might be attention, or it might be both, quite frankly. So really looking at those behaviors and thinking about what's really going on here. Because then once we know what the behavior is, why it's happening, then we can find a way to meet that need. So they don't have to engage in the behavior to do that. So instead of coming out of the bedroom 7 times, like you said, there are other alternatives to do that.
So first one, does that make sense? Like understanding, I just always think in the end, it's super insightful as a parent to look at the behavior, which is way easier said than done. Like, because we'll get into that, but to think about when they're doing it, instead of reacting to it, to try to understand it, right? Like what's up with this? Because they got intention, right? And it fits in one of those 4 lanes. So it's like, what's this about? And I think if you start to think about it analytically instead of emotionally, it's incredibly helpful. I think that way to sort of like, it's not personal. Because I'm going to tell you as a dad, it feels super personal. Super personal. But I think if you could take one step back and just think analytically about it, not emotionally. And I think sometimes for the work that we do, to go into someone else's house and watch it objectively, but then to walk into my own house. That's why I say it all the time. I think that a lot of the clinicians that work for us and other places, they struggle because they beat themselves up because it's hard to be a parent. And somehow because they can talk it and walk it somewhere else and they struggle to do it in their home, they think there's something like not okay with that. And I think it's comical because I think being a parent is the single hardest thing anybody will ever do anywhere. And it's the most subjective thing you will ever be about in your life. is your own kids and your own family, right? So it's like, makes sense why you struggle to see things as they actually are, because you're completely not objective in the situation, right? And so I always think to myself in this situation, it's like step one of, like what's this about? Helps me, right? Helps me in like my mindfulness and my mindset of, like I'm raising a child, right? I'm rearing a child, not, because I can get into this. I mean, I used to joke with my wife all the time, like, I'm sitting here arguing with a 5-year-old, right? Like I'm full on grown up having an argument with a 5-year-old. So I think if you can take that step back, that piece of like those 4 things is a good first step into figuring out, now that I know, kind of get a sense of do you and I agree that this is what this is about, or 2 different ways, like what's the plan of attack, right? How do we figure this out?
Yes.
So these seem sort of broad-based, right? Like these aren't specific to trauma because, like, as raising kids, this is pretty basic across the board, right? So is there anything from a trauma standpoint that complicates this basic lane issue?
I was gonna say, I've been talking a lot, I feel like. That's a great question, and I think there's a lot of things that influence that when you're looking at a child who's had a trauma history. And I think, so this is where I feel like we can make the shift. This is why TBRI is so wonderful. So I think all that's great, and I think it's a good foundation for understanding why the behaviors occur, but understanding that our kids who've experienced trauma, one, have a very complicated history and haven't learned those appropriate ways, but it also impacts the way their brain develops. You talk about that in pre-service training, we talk about it in the training we do about how their brain develops and how they respond in every way, from how they process the information, how their body responds, all those things. So taking into account those things. And the hard part with some of these things is the longer our kids have engaged in a certain way. So a lot of the kids who are in your homes who have learned a certain way to get attention, let's say as one, is not the right way, right? Not the way you would want them to gain that attention. It's through some of these maladaptive or problem behaviors like we talk about. It is the only way they've learned. So I think teaching that, one, we have to be very mindful is we're not saying that there is something wrong with this child. We're not saying that they're bad children. We have to understand as the caregivers, this is how they learn to meet their needs the best way they knew how. This is their survival. And I think for us as caregivers to think about it from that way, and in our approach, I think this is where the TBRI part becomes so critical, particularly, yes, the behavior part's across the board, not just for kids, it's for everyone, all of us, adults, kids, everything in between. I think the difference is really understanding that trauma and recognizing what's important for our kids. In meeting that need, how do we honestly overcompensate to give them where they feel safe, that they can let down some of that fear-based behavior and actually connect with you to be able to express their needs in a more appropriate way. So, Dave, you want to add?
No, well, I think the thing that you nailed it is the felt safety part. Like my 14-year-old that has tantrums every night or something, right? Is disrespectful. She fundamentally knows that she's safe and loved and, is precious. She's known that since the day she was born. And that's the fundamental shift from these 4 things that we're talking about here that are global I always think it's sort of like a layered thing, right? So those 4 pieces are global, that's sort of the foundation. But then if you start adding on, a tough history. Our kids have been through an enormous amount. And so all of those basic things. So then I start to think to myself, how do I begin to engage with this child and create an atmosphere, an environment that promotes connection, that promotes felt safety, right? All of those things. That's why I always think all of the kids that we work with, it just goes faster, harder, longer. All of it. If it's your biological child and you're engaging in that situation, for the kids that we work with, all of it happens more often, more intense, and lasts a lot longer. Because all of that stuff is they're trying to work through that history. And their brains just can't comprehend and wrap and and really get all of what has happened to them and where they are. And so I think they're just struggling and floundering in front of us. And I think it goes back to what we said in the beginning, to me always, is like, this is where I become in charge. And I think that for a lot of these kids, they've been in charge. And I think that that's why there's like this power struggle and the behaviors, and it's complicated and convoluted, and they feel your love and they feel that space, but they don't know to do it because it's so foreign to them. And they feel a sense of loyalty to their parents and their family, right? But then like, but I kind of like you guys, I shouldn't like you guys. I mean, all of that's like a soup. And they're just swirling in that and trying to understand all that at 12. And they're still digging Superman. You know, it's like, how do you reconcile things that as a grown person I struggle with and being like that big, right? So I think that that's the 4 things is good. I think that's a great basic way to begin to look at stuff and then start to figure out, what can I do? And again, this is the part that I tend to love, is if I'm the parent and I'm in charge, where am I at? Because I think like a lot of times the folks that we talk to, they don't want to have that conversation. They're just like, tell me what to do, and then that'll make them better, and that's the end of it. And to be honest is like, I've kind of got a tough history. And maybe a lot of this begins with me. And have I really done the work about myself to figure out, and you know, we talk about this a lot in our office, because a lot of us say this in jest in the course of our day-to-day lives. Like I'll do something, I'll be like, huh, man, that sounds exactly like my dad. That's weird, right? But I think it's one of those things, it's a really great window into, like, our parents are just beneath the surface and with us always. And that can be a fantastic thing, but sometimes it's not, right? When my old man shows up, that kid is not always a fantastic thing for my kids. And so for me, it's like, and everybody in this room feels it, the pull of life, of work, and this thing, right? It's like nonstop. The emails, the text message, the phone calls, everybody wants me right now. And when I pull into my garage, am I centered, am I mindful about, I'm about to walk in and show up as dad. Behind that garage door are 2 girls and they're waiting for me. Am I in a good state of mind that if they're not good, can I meet the need right now? That's the question. Because there are moments I will own, at least once a week, I walk through that door and I am not centered, I'm not mindful, and I'm not ready to meet the need. Because this thing, and lots of other things that are in my head, right? So that's where I feel like first we need to take the responsibility of, am I ready to be the head coach, right? Am I ready to be the coach instead of the warden, right? Because it's real easy to be the warden, show up and be like, you know, hard with them about stuff. But I think to take the time to be calm, to work with them, right, to be centered and to be intentional. I joke with our staff because we had my little one, we had a big meeting in the morning, right, one morning. And she threw like an absolute tantrum in the hallway. I mean, rolling around, kicking, screaming, the whole shooting match. And I was like, thinking in my head, I gotta go. Like, I have got to be at this meeting. I cannot be late for this meeting. And like, I remember walking up to her and I was about to pick her up and just put her in the car. And I took like a deep breath and I said to myself, like, Karen Purvis. Like, I was so close and I just like took a deep breath and just got down on the floor with her and just like sat there. And I'm gonna tell you, it took every ounce of my being not to pick her up. Not to just pick her up and put her in the car seat and drive to the meet, drop her off and go to the meeting I had to go to. And I remember saying to my staff later, it was like, we were there for 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Like, I got her to connect. We got up calmly, got her into the car, and got her to preschool. But I was just thinking to myself, what if I had just scooped her up and just put her in the seat? That is not felt safety. That is not furthering my connection, my relationship with my kid, right? And I always talk about every interaction I have as a dad with my child, that is like putting currency in the relationship I have with my daughter. And every time I pick her up, I'm pulling on that currency. I'm drawing on that currency. So I'm taking away or investing in that relationship in every single interaction I have with her. And it's such a good way for me to think about with her, am I investing right now in my relationship with my daughter, or am I pulling off of that relationship for my daughter? And I just think, like, and you guys, everybody in this room knows it, because I know my folks, sometimes my parents, it's the way they look at me. You'll be in the kitchen, you do something, they just like give you that look, and you knew in just a split second the look they gave you wasn't always a fantastic look, right? So those parenting moments are like, can be quick, but it sends a message to that kid. Like, is this a loving, nurturing thing? Or is this like a hard thing, right? Am I investing in my relationship and my connection with my kid? Or am I pulling away from my child? And I feel like all of that stuff is the stuff that, you know, when we're talking about the trauma part, like what am I thinking about? Because in my house it was always like, I want to see your eyes, right? Like, look at me. This is the respect thing. Like, look at me. I'm talking to you. When they do something, right? But always to say to myself, how often do I walk up to my kid and say, look at me. You know, I love you so much. The only time I ever said to her, look at me, is when she did something bad. Right? And so one of those engagement pieces to talk about is like the eye contact, right? Eye contact can be a good thing, but in my house, the way I grew up, you knew when you looked your folks in the eye, it was like, oh man, I'm about to get it, right? So that's some of the stuff to me, with those 4 pieces, great foundation, but then I think the trauma, all of those other strategies.
I have one more thing on this. I was trying not to, but I always have one more thing. And I think I love all those examples because I think that's exactly what it is. And understanding that, like you said at the very beginning of this part, is, you know, your girls know from the moment they were born that you love them and that they're safe. And I think for the kids that you're caring for, they haven't felt that. And even in other homes, they haven't felt that. And I don't know how many kids, we do a lot of work with teens, and I can't tell you how many of the teens are like, why does it matter? They're going to kick me out anyway, right? So there's none of that. There's no feeling of knowing they're loved, knowing they're connected, knowing they're safe, knowing that they can stay. So I think that also contributes to this because they're just sometimes waiting it out until that time. And we have had kids who are like, well, I want to be in control of this, so I'm going to dictate the situation because I know if I do this, it'll get me out of their house. And they don't want one other person telling them they can't stay there, so they will use that and understand that to at least have some control over that. So it is, it's tough, but I think like you were saying, Dave, like the most important thing is helping our kids feel safe and being mindful in your interaction, in how you're engaging and interacting with them.
And I'll say like to me, as they begin to grow up, right? They get to be adolescents and they get to be older. It's powerful when you have the relationship because to me, it's like if they're having a tough time, I'd be like, walk with me. And they'll come, right? Because they're like, I'm mad and I'm upset about something, but they're willing to listen enough to walk with you, right? And I'm not confronting them like full on this, I just be like, walk with me. And then we can talk about it like this, right? And as we walk and talk, I can bring them down kind of off that place. But if you don't have that relationship and that connection, then like, you ain't gonna go nowhere with you. So I just feel like and I love this about the behavioral part that Angie always talks about, is being super conscientious about the intentionality of when things are calm and good, the engagement part, because that's where you build up the relationship that you're gonna call on later when things are hard. Because if they know, and they know, you love them, you care about them, even if they're giving you a heck, you can call on that. And they'll respond, which is powerful.
Other questions? Answered all the questions? Yes.
The only question I have is based on the connection piece. She shuts me out and she will tell me, like, I'll say, okay, honey, let's play cards or play dollies or even connecting at bedtime. She's like, bye, go. I mean, she's 9. And that's what I mean by the sassy is I did her tone. You know, she will tell me, you know, I mean, very disrespectful, zip it. And I don't even talk to her like that. And she gets it off the playground because they're saying it to each other or the teacher or whatever. And then I don't know if she's treating me like a friend. And she's just talking to me like she would talk to a friend. But I'll say, you know, honey, I'm your mom. I love you unconditionally, but it's not okay to talk to me like that. And it doesn't stop.
Well, I think, right? Like always, I think for all the parents and the kids we work with, we make it super clear that, like, first of all, I'm in charge, right? Like, I'm the parent and you are the child. And like, I will be talked to in a way that's respectful, because that's how we talk to everybody in this house talks to each other, like respectful, right? So I need you to try that again. In a respectful way, you need to talk to me. Try it again, right? So that's, like, I would right away cut that off. Like, that is not, like, don't get it twisted, right? Like, don't mistake kindness for weakness. I'm in charge. I'm the boss, right? Try that again. Because you might push other people around in other settings. Like, I'm kind and loving, but there's a way we talk to each other in this house. And it's not like that, right? So I need you to try it again. And when they do, be like, great job. That's immediately make the pivot back to relationship. Like, that's fantastic. Awesome, right? I appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. One is the TBRI language. Sorry, I lost my voice today. There's that language of do-over.
Yes.
A do-over. And it triggers me when my kids do that. But for some reason, that word do-over, it brings me down. I'm sorry, could we have a do-over? And it just levels the field where it's not them against me. And it just brings grace into the realm. And then also you circle back later at a time where she's enjoying herself with you. Beg God to figure out what those times are. It could be something like a walk or a drive. I want to show you this pretty house or this playground that I found. I thought you might like it. And then see how the kids are treating her on the playground. Because it might be something that she's feeling a victim of, and then you can speak life and say, oh, I'm so sorry someone said zip it to you. And that humbled me. I've actually said zip it to my kids. So I'm glad you're bringing this up because it is demeaning, right? And sad and doesn't build, right? But you can find out, oh, I'm sorry they said that to you. I really want to hear your ideas. And if that, those kind of things, use that as a circle back to build. Everything, circle back to build, circle back and build, circle back and build.
Yeah, and the redos are great. I think we use this in whatever language you want to try it again, or let's have a redo, or, we use both of those, I think. I'm trying to think of what else we say, and it doesn't have to be like, you can do it in a playful, more moving forward way also, but I think the more of those you do, and like Dave said, not allowing it to go unchecked. Even when you said that, I was like, oh, that got me. I was like, oh, I felt that when you said zip it. That's a tough thing when you have your child saying that to you. And I think when we go back to being mindful in that moment, again, if we're triggered, it's a lot harder to be and respond. It's a lot harder to be like, you need to try that again. That's not how we talk here, right? Why don't you try it the way we talk to each other, or something like that, where you're like,
Memorizing.
yeah. Me, I'm like, what did you just say? That's what I hear in my head, right? So, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
I was just going to say, my experience usually is with younger children, but sometimes they don't know the language to use, so we have to give them the language. What you just said to me was pretty hurtful and disrespectful. What are you trying to say to me? And maybe we can figure out a better way for you to say it. So maybe what you're trying to say to me is, Mom, I'd like some privacy right now. That's fine to say it that way, but, so sometimes they just don't have the verbiage, the vocabulary to say what it is they're trying to say. I used to have a little girl who, at 2, would just say, go away, and her mom could not stand her saying that. And I'm like, well, she doesn't have the words to say, you're in my personal space right now, and I'd really like you to back off. That's what she's trying to tell you, but, you have to teach her a better way to say that.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things, if we know they need space, then you can ask for space, or I need some space, please, right? So those are appropriate ways instead of saying zip it, right? So, because that is a pretty tough thing.
It's important to let them know that is hurtful.
Yeah.
She needs to know she can hurt your feelings too.
Oh, so you got all of these different behaviors, and obviously different kids have different ones, and the different kids have different trauma backgrounds, which make them set them up for different issues, but we've all got like at least one. I have 2 or 3 of the ones that you say, let's try that again, or can you try that again with respect? And they're like, no, you stupid idiot. I'm being honest here. Because they have a strong need to control their environment. And so then no matter what you suggest or no matter how you do it, their need to control is so desperate within them that they can't do that. At least in the moment, even.
I'll say one thing and then so I think this goes, I'm going to just refer to what you said earlier anyway, is you said not in that moment. But I think that's why the importance of like what Dave was saying earlier, all the moments surrounding that, building up that relationship and that connection, practicing it. We practice it with our kids, like, all right. And I mean, those of you who are familiar with TBI, Dr. Purvis does role plays. We don't do the puppets and all that sort of stuff, but practicing that language. Like you can say, hey, when you're mad, you can say, I need space, or can I have a minute, instead of saying zip it, right? Like you can practice those things. And I think when you build up those connections, when you have that relationship, I think going back to what you're saying, the currency, you have that currency, then when you say those things, they're going to be, they might not like it and they might say it begrudgingly. So I think this is where we have to choose our battles, and they're not going to say it exactly the way, but is it incrementally better than it was before? Let's take it and then let's go from there and grow from there in terms of that.
No, I think you nailed it I think they struggle with, like, who's in charge. So that's why I always feel like with a lot of the kids we work with that are in care, that's such a huge thing to let them know, like, you're good here, right? Like, that felt safety piece is foundational. But also, like, structure and nurture. Like, I bring nurture, but don't get it twisted, I also bring structure. And there's a way, like, we talk to each other in this house, the way we conduct ourselves in this house, right? So I just think that there's a lot to be said about that. And I think sometimes we tend to back off. I think I could talk about that all night. We've collectively lightened the structure. I think, like, there's a lot to be said about structure and order. And I think when kids feel that, they thrive in that. And I think that they've grown up in chaos. So I think as soon as and they'll push back against it, because I think everybody does. When someone tries to bring structure and order, and Ange can tell you from a behavioral perspective, it is inherently human that it gets worse before it gets better. Because they're just gonna fight and resist, like we all do. Think about it at work when there's a new boss comes in and they institute new rules. Can you believe this guy's, right? It's like, we all fight back against the change that we don't wanna have, right? It's innate. So our kids do the same thing, harder, faster, longer, right? Our kids always with all of this stuff, right? But that's why I just think that structure and nurture piece is vital, that we hold the line with that stuff to let them know. Because we're doing them a favor, because they should never be in charge, right? They should get the opportunity to be a child. I mean, it's the most precious part of your life. Not paying a mortgage, right? Not making tough decisions. Like, they should get to enjoy Superman and just chill out. But instead they're preoccupied with, like, what's gonna happen tonight? Where are we gonna be tomorrow morning? Right? They're always that issue. And so I think when we bring the structure, we're really, like, moving that off of them. That something they should never had put on them in the first place.
And that made me think the same thing you were saying about the felt safety piece, right? Because then when there's that structure, then they feel more safe and they know they're safe. So some of that, there's no need for some of that anymore to have that. I know, I saw you back here. I'm trying to figure out how to get to you. Hold on.
So do you guys ever go into homes like with children who have been diagnosed with like severe autism and fetal alcohol? Like one of our little guys, he's 3. So there's a lot of cognitive delays there, but I know one of our big struggles at home is, so he's very sensory seeking, is just safety. But he's constantly like climbing and trying to get out of things. And it's like, we can try reasoning with him as much as we want, and it just doesn't happen. So is that something you guys work with?
Yes, give Liam the microphone. We do. Yeah, so we absolutely do, and we can connect with you afterwards. And so we have a team of folks across the counties here who come in home in various capacities, honestly. So we do. We have a team of behavior analysts and registered behavior technicians and TBI practitioners. So we absolutely do. And it is hard. I think this goes back to what we're talking about with some of the brain development. Sometimes that they don't have the language. So what are some of the things we can help put in place that still follow under this whole approach, but still is able to be effective for the children in your home. And that's why we have our team here that is going into homes and because it is, I mean, we do lots of trainings. Leanne does lots of trainings, right, with the team. But it's when it's happening in your home in that moment. I don't know, all the trainings, like, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do here. So having someone side by side with you to kind of coach you through and walk you through that is absolutely something. And I know we have Leanne has some cards, we have brochures, we have all sorts of things. Just gonna go get them.
No, I was gonna say, like for us, and it's interesting because the reason we put together the program we put together was because I just think in the end, the thing that really moves the needle is going into the home. Because everybody's family is unique, and every child's situation is unique. So it's really hard. I mean, we've been doing this a long time, and I've seen a lot of fancy PowerPoint presentations. But I've never seen a PowerPoint presentation change anybody's life. You know what I mean? Like, people can stand up all day and talk about it and sound very fancy, but it's like I watch them go into somebody's house and they fall apart. I mean, they know all the words, but they just can't do any of it. And so that's no good to you. PowerPoint, right? So for us, I feel like it's a good foundation so we have shared language. And I think if you've got a strong culture in your child welfare system, I mean, language is foundational to any culture. So we need shared language, right? So when we get started, I feel like the training's the getting started part. Now we are speaking the same language, let's get to work. And come in the home and figure all that stuff out, right? Because your family's special. My kids are special, everybody's kids are different.
Other questions?
Do you go into schools?
Do we go into schools? We try. Daycares, we definitely can go into schools. We're working on it. Some schools are receptive and some we work with to try to get into, but we can offer that.
And do you only work with children in foster care, or do you now also work with children who have been adopted?
We do, yep.
Because we lost family initiative, we adopted. Because we adopted.
Yeah.
We definitely do posted up services. I know Leanne probably throws stuff at us.
She's out getting her cards right now, but we do. We do. All right, cool. So we can definitely connect afterwards too, so. Good. Oh.
Is there a faith background to what you guys do as well?
So our organization is not a faith-based organization. We are definitely both people of faith, but yeah, it's not a faith-based organization what we do. But I think the cool part, and you guys can feel it, you know, I think everything about the work like that Dr. Purvis did and Dr. David Cross did, you feel it in the essence. I mean, I think that's why it resonates like so profoundly with people. I don't know. It's funny, we're conditioned like not to say a lot about this, right? But I always think about it, right?
That's why
it's like so hard to hold it back, because I feel like when you go out in life, right, you're only supposed to talk about this kind of one way. But I just think it's like the most basic part of like when you went to Sunday school, right? It's like how you value, I mean, everything we were taught about Jesus is the essence of what really like that model's about, right? I mean, that's why I think anyone that hears it is like moved so deeply, because I just think it's the singular message of life, right? About the way we treat each other, the way we treat, I mean, I always think to myself about the word precious, right? The Care and Purpose doesn't by accident use that word all the time. And I think that there is a preciousness about life. I mean, particularly about, children, right? Just resonates with you to the point you get like goosebumps talking about it, right? So again, not that like we are, but I think that's why we use this model, because I think it's the way you can talk about that message anywhere, right, in any setting.
Do you work with the Florida Center though?
So Leanne can talk about this better than I
Do you
can.
work with the Florida Center?
Yeah,
I was gonna say, because I know they do take care of you guys.
yeah.
And so does Children First, that's where I used to work.
So when we have children who are getting services at the Florida Center, or there's a child that's been diagnosed with FASD through the Florida Center, we have a new partnership with their parent advocate, and so we'll staff those cases together so that we are all on the same page about the services that kiddo is going to get. So, where are you laughing at me?
That TBRI training, I'm sorry. TBRI training in general has been really hard to get in person since COVID. And everybody now wants to do it virtual. And it's not the same because, I mean, if you take, like I took the first course before they shut everything down, not even the whole course, like the first day. And that day you touch on some basics, but you can also dialogue about how, what does that look like in your home, right? Because I'll have the best plan in the world and then I'm like, oh, can we try that again with respect? And they go, no, you stupid idiot. I'm not going to do that. Or they run away, or whatever they do, and you're like, oh, I didn't see that on the video with Karen. So when Karen was doing it, the kid was like, yeah, okay. But it didn't play out that way in my house. So, like, I still have never taken the full course, and no one wants to offer it in person. And I think it's a big disservice to families that need the help, is that you can start to get the language, but if you can't come together around it and really have training that is in person where we role play and I can pretend that I'm the kid and you can show me how to deal with me, then I just think that is lacking right now. I asked, there was a couple of weeks ago, an intro class, and I'm like, okay, is the whole series, all the training is going to be offered? Because I'm willing to drive for that.
And
Well,
we'll
no.
do them all in person. I think
No, we're only going to do the intro that way, and
Yeah, we'll do them all. I think the hardest part for us is that people don't. Like, we'll offer it a bunch of times, like in person that way. We just can't get nobody to come. People want to get out of pajamas to come come somewhere, so. If you want it, we will do it.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that a little bit, and I know you guys are involved in this, but when Bridge Life first started to introduce TBRI in the area, there were not a lot of practitioners in our area, and now we're looking at, One More Child, Safe Children Coalition, Family Initiative, Florida, we have so many agencies now that have TBRI practitioners, which we're really excited about. And so we actually have a meeting soon to get all of our different agencies together that have practitioners and say, how are we gonna approach this so that we're not, we're not offering a training at the same time that you guys are, but this school system wants us to train, but we don't have capacity to do that. Do you guys? And so that's really good feedback. If you have other feedback regarding TBRI and how it would be accessible to your family, I think we'd be super interested in hearing that.
Yeah.
I said the in-person thing is great.
We love in
It's the
person,
best.
I know.
do it for 6 hours on Saturday, how can I do?
Well, the heart of TBRI is connection. You can't do that through a screen,
Amen.
so, yeah.
Amen. My staff and I feel it.
I know, we're over Zoom.
Right.
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Still working.
Did you do the intro with us? I remember we did one class and then COVID happened.
With the Pearl Project.
Okay, because we did in March 2020, we did the intro and then,
And this was several years ago,
Yeah.
but then it's like,
Yeah.
everything gets shut down,
Yeah.
and you just can't even access it.
yeah, I'm with you, so.
It's fun. In person.
Other questions? I know,
Well, I wanted to say that we did do family initiatives with my foster son, and it was brilliant. Where, we learned a lot. Again, like you were saying, it was modeled for me. And I knew the TBRI principles going into it, and I didn't know that he would have been equipped with that. And he was much younger, probably my son's age. I've got a big age range anyway. Not that son, not my foster son's age, but. And I think the biggest take home for me that your program offers was that dream 8 years ago is in home, modeling it, building a relationship with the parent, being the child's advocate, but also being the parent's advocate, And so I think some of the things were modeled was down on the ground, low level humility, just down. No, thank you, Oh, no, thank you. No, thank you for that. Let's not stand on the chair. No, thank you. And adding that level of, anyway, just all of that modeling, I could make a pretty long paragraph as well, but that piece that you're saying, I just think it's a good team. You really make a good team. It's like a team effort.
That was awesome, thank you for sharing. I know, I love it. We got a good crew. We do. We do. I know we're right up against it. Any closing thoughts?
No, I thank y'all for taking the time.
Yeah, it was great to be
It's
here.
cool to talk to like-minded people,
Yes.
right? It's, feels good.
Yeah, and Leanne has the brochures and cards and all that if you need our contact information. But thank you, this was fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yes,
I
yeah.
appreciate it.
In person too, right?
Thank you guys so much. So just a few things as we kind of wrap up, and we're early, so you might get a little bit more time to visit, or just get out of here sooner than you thought. We always have food left over, so please make sure that if you want to take any of that with you, we don't want it left, so go ahead and take it home. Your certificates are in the back. With Teresa, so if you need those, you can grab those on your way out. Hopefully you saw in the lobby there are all kinds of donations that are out there, Easter basket stuff specifically. We also have some leftover superhero 5K race shirts and a few odds and ends out there. So please take that. If you are in contact with families who aren't here tonight, you can take stuff for them. We're just passing all of it off to the Foster and Adoptive Parent Association after tonight. So anything y'all don't take is going out of here anyway. So please help yourselves to those things. Any questions? If you're interested in family camp, if you're an adoptive family and you're interested in learning more about family camp, I'd love to talk to you about that as well. Okay? All right, well, I'm going to close this out in prayer, and then you guys can chill for the next 10 minutes or so if you want to. God, thanks so much for the opportunity to be together. It does make a difference to be in the same room with people. And so we're thankful for this church for having us. We're thankful for an army of child-serving volunteers out there who have had a great night with kids, just helping them feel loved and making sure that they're safe. We're thankful for the people in this room who are doing really hard work. And a lot of times we're tired and we're frustrated by the system, and we can let all kinds of things creep in. But God, I pray that as we go out tonight, you remind us why we're doing this, that you help us to rejoice in the way that you have formed our families, even in hardship, and that you would strengthen us through your spirit and through just encouragement from each other. In Jesus' name, amen.